You're listening to another Discovering New Horizons podcast featuring Dr. Jim Polikoff. Today's guest for this Body, Mind, Soul episode is Dr. Michael Roizen, author of The Great Age Reboot. As always, each podcast episode is a search for the truth and how it applies to our daily lives and well-being. Now here to take you on this exciting New Horizons journey is our host, Dr. Jim Polikoff.
Yes, this is Dr. Jim Polikoff, and I sincerely wish to thank the thousands of listeners who continue to follow my podcasts. Your loyalty is greatly appreciated. So let's get to it. Sometime in the not-too-distant future, robots will remove plaque from your arteries. You'll be able to simply print a 3D organ to replace the diseased one. And not too long from now, a 95-year-old person will look and function more like the typical 50-year-old of today. My guest for this Body, Mind, Soul episode is Dr. Michael Roizen, who will help us discover how to live a healthier, younger, and longer life. Dr. Roizen is certified by the American Boards of Internal Medicine and Anesthesiology. He is a past chair of the FDA, co-founder of Real Age, Inc., and has served as Chief Wellness Officer at the renowned Cleveland Clinic. He's appeared on Oprah Winfrey, Good Morning America, CNN, and The Today Show. And he has authored or co-authored 5 #1 New York Times bestsellers. Dr. Roizen's latest book, which we will discuss, is The Great Age Reboot, Cracking the Longevity Code for a Younger Tomorrow. Welcome, Dr. Roizen. What an honor it is to have you as our guest. I really appreciate you being here.
My privilege. It's my honor.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. Now, Dr. Roizen, in the Seductive Science chapter of your book, you state, and I'll quote, "The era of the bionic man and woman is upon us." And then you will reference the regeneration of trillions of cells that contain our DNA, which in turn holds our genetic information that controls how our bodies function. So I'm assuming this is a key to longevity and maintaining youth. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so both it is possible to be the key to youth. We're still investigating it. So when the Human Genome Project started, we expected both the Craig Venter group, which was private, and the Collins group was with the NIH, expected to find 300,000 genes. That's how much DNA we had in our nuclei. But they only found around 22,500, and only 1,500 genes are on at any one time. That means producing proteins or watching other genes. That's what being on as a gene is. But they called the rest of the DNA, that 280,000 or 275,000 group that would have been genes, as junk. But what they found, actually, is the majority of that is switches that turn our genes on or off. And lifestyle changes, whether you stress a muscle or not, whether you manage stress or not, what food you eat, change those switches from on to off or off to on. Let me give you one specific example. So when you stress a muscle, you turn on a gene in that muscle that produces the small protein arisen. Arisen gets across your blood-brain barrier and releases brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor, which grows your hippocampus, your memory center, and your cognitive function. So why does physical activity help your brain? Well, it's not only that it helps the arteries and provides more oxygen to your brain, but it turns on that gene that grows your brain. And so, or a gene that turns on a gene that grows your brain.
Is this what you term genetic engineering?
So you are a genetic engineer, whether you know it or not, whether you went to MIT or Caltech or went to high school, you are a genetic engineer. And that's some of this seductive science.
Interesting. Now, it leads me to your chapter about building a better body and brain. First, I guess we've already talked about the immune system, how the immune system ages, and obviously organ shrinkage, for example. Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on building a better body and brain.
Well, as we go, the middle part of the book is on the economics of this and how that, as we spoke to before, compounding helps benefit, and that you'll be putting more money. Even if you put 3% of a $15 per hour income in, starting at about age 22, and you go to 65, you have about $250,000 at that 4% growth rate. But if you last to 95, it's 1.4 million. And if you get a match, it's 2.8 million. Well, the similar thing goes with your body. By doing things that are healthy for your body, only having food that you love and that loves your body back, the earlier you start on resilience or stress management, the earlier you start on avoiding what we call unforced errors like vaping or smoking, the earlier you avoid texting while driving, the earlier you avoid, you get the right sleep and start building a better brain, the longer you can live healthy. So there are 33 things you can do for your brain, and we've already mentioned one of them. That's stressing a muscle, whether it is by resistance training, lifting weights, lifting your body, or whether it is cardio exercise, or even just walking or jumping. Those things help, but also speed of processing games. So doing just 18 hours of double decision or freeze frame over a 10-year period, that's only 2 hours, an average of 2 hours a year, decreased dementia in a large randomized controlled study, actually 3 large studies now, by over 30%.
Can you give us an example of that?
A speed of processing game? Sure.
Yes.
It is double decision means there are in the middle of your screen would appear 2 cars, a car or a truck. You have to identify whether it's a car or a truck. And then someplace in the periphery of the screen is a sign that says Route 66. And you have to identify the quadrant or the 8th point where that, if you will, Route 66 sign is. Well, by training yourself to be able to do that, and by the computer going faster and faster as you improve, or going slower and slower if you're not capable of doing it or not getting better, you train yourself to get better at it. And for some reason, by doing speed of processing games, you decrease your risk of dementia. Or in doing what would be called executive function games, reasoning games, those did not have the same benefit. They did that in the study. So it was only speed of processing games that made a difference.
Where does our listening audience find a speed of processing game?
Well, you can, if you go to our app, Reboot Your Age, it's embedded in that. So whether it is sleep or other things, what we did was we put all of the things that make a difference, and we partnered with those that have what we call randomized controlled trials that show a benefit. So that's in our, now, if you want to get, just go and get the game alone and not get the whole process, brainhq.com is where you can get that.
brainhq.com. But we're also going to have information directing our listeners to your app on our website. So I do want to emphasize that.
Thank you.
It gets good use. Let's discuss some self-reengineering. We could be the captain of our own ship in much of this. In fact, I think we have to be. As a nutritionist,
you absolutely, because no one else is going to do it for you.
Right, exactly.
That's exactly right.
So as a nutritionist, I'd like to get your take on the types of foods we should eat. In other words, what should we be eating? What should we be avoiding? I know this is a huge subject, but maybe you can give us a few examples.
Okay, so the data we know are that there are, if you will, 5 categories that age you. Everything else we don't have good data on. So let me give you those 5. Simple sugars, added syrups, and simple carbohydrates, that is, things that raise your blood sugar quickly, change the way your proteins function to age you. Let me give you an example. If you have extra glucose in your body, it gets on your hemoglobin. That's called hemoglobin hemoglobin A1C, that raises your hemoglobin A1C. That hemoglobin, all it is the normal hemoglobin with a sugar stuck in the A1C position. And what does that do? It doesn't release oxygen normally. So that's why we get kidney disease when you're a diabetic, and that's why you get foot ulcers when you're a diabetic. And maybe it does the same thing to proteins in your lining of your arteries and in your brain. And that's why raising your blood sugar quickly is associated with developing cognitive dysfunction. It's associated with heart attacks and strokes. And by the way, it also gets on your white cells, so they don't attack bacteria as well. So that's why diabetics get more infections. So the
minimize
point is,
the use of sugar then.
So we want you not to have simple sugars, added syrups, and simple carbs. Complex carbs are usually okay, and we now know how to monitor that. You can get a blood sugar, if you will, continuous blood sugar monitor like Freestyle Libre or the Dexcom, and you can see, does that food raise my blood sugar too fast if you want to do it? The other foods are foods with carnitine, lecithin, and choline and saturated fat. So you need both of those together, such as red meat, processed red meat, and egg yolks. Why does that aid you? Because it changes the bacteria inside you to produce an inflammatory protein, trimethylamine, which increases inflammation in your body. Everything else, as far as we know, seems to be okay for the human body in moderation. And we also know that that if you eat less for 5 days in a row, what we call a fasting mimicking diet by Dr. Longo, we know in randomized trials that slows your rate of aging. To eat only 750 calories for 5 days every quarter, if you will, 4 times a year. So
for our listening audience who doesn't necessarily, it's difficult for people to keep track of all of this. Aren't you a proponent of plant-based diets?
Absolutely. No. I actually believe a plant-based diet is best. Plant-based maybe plus salmon to get omega-3 or the DHA, which is key for brain functioning and a number of other immune functioning. But in fact, I strongly believe that, we don't have good enough data to say in randomized controlled trials that we should only eat plant-based. But we do know, if you look at it, that red meat, processed red meat, simple sugars, and egg yolks are probably not healthy for you, which means that if you're eating a plant-based plus salmon, or is a great, which is what I do, or just plant-based is probably excellent. But remember, plant-based, you can, sugar is a plant, if you will. Cane sugar and corn sugar are plants. So we want to make sure people understand plant-based alone isn't the solution if you're eating French fries that are covered with sugar, if you will.
So if someone's on a Mediterranean diet, they're probably going in the right direction, particularly if, they have more of a plant-based approach to what they're eating.
Absolutely.
Right. So what about, I'm just curious, what about supplements? Do you feel they do any good or discolor your urine?
Say that again.
Supplements.
Supplementation. So again, in the app, we cover about 50 supplements. And as you know, in the book, we mention probably about 20. I don't know whether it's 15 or 20, but there are about 15 or 20 that have been shown in randomized controlled trials to be beneficial to the average person. And let me give you an example of that, which is also in the book, I know, is coenzyme Q10. We know in randomized controlled trials that it alone, even if you don't have a statin, but it alone decreases your risk of heart disease and stroke. Randomized controlled trials, 200 milligrams a day. So some supplements are beneficial. Some are even beneficial for the vast majority of us. Most of us need a multivitamin, multimineral supplement because we don't eat a rainbow of food every day and week. And so and the data also supports that. If you look in the Physicians' Health Study, yeah, the 10-year data didn't support it, but the 20-year data show about an 18% reduction in cancer rates and a 25% reduction in heart disease. So it seems to help in a long-term process in doing that. So the randomized studies in one case, epidemiologic studies in the other, but they show a benefit. So there are a number of supplements, and one that I'll tell you is crazy because none of us on the we have a scientific advisory board that helps with all this. I don't do it all myself. And so none of the 10 of us were routinely taking phosphocreatine. Phosphocreatine, you think of as a bodybuilding supplement for kids, right? The teenagers use it to bulk up their muscles, and the bodybuilders use it. But it turns out that it not only builds up your muscles, which is important when you're old as well, but it helps brain functioning. Again, randomized controlled trials show a decrease in all-cause mortality and a decrease in dementia risks when you take about 4 grams of phosphocreatine a day.
Phosphocreatine, okay. So that's a supplement in itself because that's not a widely known supplement.
Correct. I'll show you. So I have no interest in this company.
Unfortunately, our listeners won't be able to see that.
Well, I'm showing you this costs a total of $40, and I'm still going on it in 6 months. So it's inexpensive supplement, and not only I'm
you're an Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's what you are, correct?
No. At 76, want to keep your muscles strong so you don't fall and don't hurt yourself, but also it's good for your brain. So it's something that almost all of us on the scientific advisory board, once we looked at the data, we said, holy mackerel, why didn't we know this data? So there are people who criticize supplement manufacturers, but the ones that do it right and have the data, and that's why we review over 50 supplements in the library on the app.
Well, that app, again, is very important because obviously we know that over-the-counter supplements are not necessarily effective. And obviously it's the purity and what you're able to get derived from the supplement. But Dr. Roizen, your book describes 5 main actions that have proven to have the most influence on your biological functions, including stress, your 8-hour cycle of eating, how you sleep. Can you get into that? Stress, the 8-hour cycle, and sleep?
So let me just go in the stress. So stress is the greatest ager. It affects over 250 genes. So when you're stressed, you turn on genes that promote inflammation, that promote dementia, that inhibit your immune system. When you have friends, and so we say posse and purpose are the most important things you can have, because if you have 6 friends you're vulnerable to and see every month in both the Whitehall studies in Great Britain, the Berkman studies in Berkeley, and now the loneliness studies that have been done, if you have those 6 friends, you're much more resilient to all of life's major events. So major events will happen. A friend will die. Someone will get sick. You'll get sued. You'll have financial problems. You'll have to take a new job. You'll move. These are there are 13 major life events. And each one of those will make you at least 8 years older in the year it occurs. Except, if you have 3 of them, you end up having the risk of dying and developing disease and disability of someone who's 32 years older. So you're 35 now, you get 3 of these, you're 70, you're 67. But if you have 6 friends and a purpose in life, you're only 2 years older. So resilience is incredibly important at decreasing the effects of stress in turn. And by doing stress management, you change and having friends, a posse and purpose, you change those genes from promoting inflammation to turning on anti-inflammatory genes that produce anti-inflammatory proteins. So you're a genetic engineer just by having friends and a purpose. So we think the most important thing you can do in self-engineering is cultivate friends. So it takes some work, right? Friends don't come automatically. So on Saturday or Sunday, call up 3 or 4 people each day and make sure you do it routinely and find people you'll love to talk to and cultivate those friendships, including with your spouse.
And avoid talking politics. That could stress you out in these days, particularly.
That's probably true. Now, the purpose is also important. So people over the age of 70 and who've retired say, what do I do for a purpose? I'm no longer working. Well, you've got your grandkids. You've got, you can do volunteering activity. There are a lot of things, but you should find a purpose. We call it social prescribing in the medical community. So that's incredibly important. Now, sleep. When we sleep, we get rid of, if you will, junk, our waste product in our brain. As we dehydrate from not drinking water as we sleep, not drinking and eating, our brain cells shrink a little. And that opens up pathways between them called gliolymphatics or lymphatics, like lymphatics in our body, that where we can get rid of the brain waste so we don't have inflammation. So one of the theories on why it's so important to get that 5 to 8 hour period of sleep, meaning the longer you go in that period, the more your brain is shrunk, the more it opens up, the more you get rid of waste, is to avoid the inflammatory changes that occur when you still have waste in the brain and your immune system tries to get rid of it by attacking it and mistakenly attacks some of the neurons.
I don't want to be gross, but you're talking about a mental bowel movement in a sense.
That's exactly right. Getting rid of the brain waste. And you do that by not drinking water at night and by sleeping longer. That period of longer sleep is key. And there are other, obviously, regenerative functioning that occurs during the brain period of sleep.
What happens to people who don't sleep well?
They end up aging quicker. So one of the things is to work on and to get help if you're not sleeping well, to learn how to sleep well. So there are a lot of, and again, there's programs that we talk about in the book and in the app to help.
So in your app, you have some suggestions in terms of sleeping better.
We have more than suggestions. Yes, we have a program that helps you do it in coordination with someone else.
This app is very important. It's becoming increasingly important. Our audience has got to go to get the app. You're going to get it on our website because that's something we're definitely going to mention. Now, you also talked about eating in your book. You talked about eating within a certain period of time. I think it's 8 hour period of time?
Right. So what we've learned is that, and more importantly than the 8 hour period of time is in fact this restriction for 4 days or 5 days actually, every quarter, for 750 calories a day for 5 days is the Longo studies, Longo, as if you want to Google him. But he's done what's called a fasting mimicking diet. And we go through what he did, but he's shown it in graduate students. Initially, it was a mistake learned in mice. And then they fed the mice by mistake after 5 days of calorie restriction, and they did better than just calorie restriction alone. So 5 days of calorie restriction in graduate students, in 35 to 40-year-olds, now in people 75 to 80, and in cancer patients as well, seems to help with improving every measure of aging we know of. So there in the book and the app we showed it. Also, you can get it. Longo has a company called Prolon. I think it's prolon.com, where you can get this over the 750 calories in a diet sent to you It's fairly expensive. I think it's around $200 a month to get it. But in any case, the point is that going to 750 calories for 5 days is an important thing. The second, the derivative of that is eating only in an 8-hour period seems to help as well. Not as good data, but pretty good data.
You're talking about all of your meals within an 8-hour period, correct?
Yeah, only eating within the 8-hour period. Yeah, you can have water and black coffee or plain tea outside of that, but that's it. So the point is, in that 8-hour period, the rest of the period you go through a glucose to ketone shift, and that ketone shift, that's why the 5 days is really much better. But in that ketone shift, you start turning your body into a survival mode, and it gets rid of old cells, which seem to help. Now, there's another benefit. Eating earlier in that 8-hour period, meaning eating when the sun is up, and eating early in it, meaning not having dinner, not eating or eating smaller meals later, because a calorie is not a calorie is not a calorie in your body. It is in the test tube, but in your body, a calorie in the morning is like 0.95 calories. A calorie in the evening is like 1.1 calorie.
Interesting.
Because we develop insulin resistance during the day.
Interesting. All right. So eating early, eating within an 8-hour period, the 5-day fast. We can certainly find more about this in your book, The Great Age Reboot, and also in the app that we're going to have on our website. I have winding up, I'm looking to see where we're probably at that, getting close to that time limit. But there are some predictions that you make in the book. And obviously, we're not going to get into all of them now. You make 14 predictions for 2050 or before. So we're going to address a few of them, and I'd just like your comments on them.
We did them in jest. You should know that.
Well, I will see if it's in jest or not. You'll be able to replace body parts using your own stem cells and 3D printing. True or false?
We don't know if that's going to come true, but it is possible.
It's possible. All right. People will live to 150 on a regular basis.
Again, possible as you get rebooted, but again, it is possible, but you have to live 2050 to see if any of these predictions come
I can't
true.
imagine living to 150, my God, but I suppose with a little plastic surgery filled in there, you might be able to have a normal appearance. Through cell and gene manipulation, we can create newborns to our exact specifications.
Unfortunately, that's starting to happen in China as they're changing the gene functioning. And so that's a real ethical dilemma.
All right. Well, obviously it is. Now, we only mentioned 3 of those. There are 11 more predictions, be it tongue-in-cheek or not, that are in your book. I mean, your book is amazing. I mean, our audience has got to get it. In any case, you're discovering things that will make you 20 years younger. At least we start with that. The book, The Great Age Reboot, Cracking the Longevity Code for a Younger Tomorrow. It's published by National Geographic, correct?
Correct.
And it's in major bookstores such as Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon.com. Am
Absolutely.
I right on that? On your website, which we're going to publish on our website. With, obviously they can get the book, I'm sure, through your website. And you can find out more about Dr. Michael Roizen and his other books, your other bestsellers on the New York Times list, by visiting our website, jamespolikoff.com. And of course, in a few minutes, we're going to give more information about that. But in any case, Dr. Roizen, I'm looking to say this has been, I guess we could probably go on for at least another hour. You barely scratched the surface. That's why people have got to read your book, The Great Age Reboot.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for sharing such valuable information and providing us a glimpse into our future, whether it be 150 years from now or 10 extra years. I'll take the 10 extra years, if nothing else. Hopefully you'll join us again.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
You can discover more information about our guest, Dr. Michael Roizen, and his latest book, The Great Age Reboot, by visiting our website, jamespolikoff.com. That's James, POLAKOF.com. jamespolikoff.com. You'll also discover a variety of valuable resources on our website and other terrific Body, Mind, and Soul podcast episodes. Again, jamespolikoff.com. Now back to Dr. Jim.
Our production coordinator, Faith Michelle, is absolutely correct. Our Discovering New Horizons website contains an amazing amount of valuable information and resources and a number of great body, mind, and soul podcasts. Plus, we certainly will welcome your comments and suggestions. Keep them coming in. They're so helpful. It helps us pick new guests, new topics. Again, we invite you to visit James Polikoff, P-O-L-A-K-O-F, jamespolikoff.com. I think you're going to find a lot of interesting information there. And we'll see you again. This is Dr. Jim Polikoff. Thanks for listening.